Welcome to the Select Star Podcast, your resource for innovative technology, developer topics, and more. Here's your host, Margot McCabe from the HarperDB team.
Hello, and welcome everyone to the Select Star Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. Season 2, we've got some really awesome guests in the pipeline, including today's guest. We have Pratham Prasoon. You might know him from social media. He's pretty big on Twitter, publishing a lot of developer content, things like that. Currently, he is a developer advocate, if that's correct, for thirdweb, which I'm excited to learn a little bit more about. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited for this podcast and what we discuss, and looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to be discussing a little bit about the buzzword that now we're seeing everywhere, which is Web3, as I'm sure anyone listening knows by now. So we're going to be talking with Pratham today about what really is Web3 and more specifically what it means for developers, which I'm excited to dive into. But before that, I'd love to just learn a little bit about kind of who you are, what's your background, journey into tech, and kind of what you're working on now.
Yeah, so hey everyone, my name is Pratham Prasoon, and I was always interested with technology and computers and things like that, from a very young age. I sort of got started with programming in my fifth grade. That was like 6 years ago. So I was just trying to see what all of this is about. What can you do with code? Just playing around and stuff like that. And eventually, I just over the years I just went down the rabbit hole and like learned everything myself. I started by just trying to I wanted to make games at the start. So I used to, look up tutorials on how do you make a game in this, this program. It was called Scratch, I think. So I was just, curious about these things. And eventually, I just learned about different programming languages. I learned about Python, I learned about JavaScript, then HTML, CSS, and just all these different languages. And, I just tried to explore more and more. And that's what brought me to where I am right now. So in 2020, because of the pandemic, I had a lot of free time on my hands because I didn't have to go to school. So I started learning about machine learning and artificial intelligence with Python. That's something I still do. And then around last year, like midway through last year, I started learning about Web3 and what all of that is about. So I just kept exploring things, and that's what really brought me here.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's interesting that, instead of what a lot of people did through not having to go to school or not having to do as much during the pandemic, a lot of people probably just kind of chilled and took the time to relax, but you just took the time to continue learning and diving into more technologies, which is really cool. Are you still in school? Are you back full time or still at home or?
Yeah, so I've been managing school and a full-time job until now. So as you mentioned, I'm currently working as a developer advocate for thirdweb for the time being. So I've just been doing both. So it's full-time school, like full-time job and my school going together. Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. You'll have to do
Yeah,
a whole other podcast sometime on time management.
funnily enough, I'm actually pretty bad at time management. It's just that because of the pandemic, I've gotten a bit lucky where, since I'm at my home, I can somehow manage both of these. But yeah, I'd say I just got lucky.
Well, that's very cool. So then what is thirdweb and how did you find them and how long have you been a dev advocate for them?
So thirdweb is basically it makes Web3 development for developers much easier.
Okay.
I've been with thirdweb for the last 4 months, but I'll be leaving in a little bit because I have some other side project that will be revealed very soon, that I'm working on right now. But yeah, I've been working for them for 4 months, and I actually knew the founders since last year,
Oh,
and
cool.
they reached out to me, and they wanted to know if I wanted to work for thirdweb, like if I could collaborate with thirdweb in some way. And for the past 4 months I've been like an employee for them, and yeah, as a developer advocate. So
Awesome.
yeah, that's how it went. And third web is basically, as I mentioned, it basically makes Web3 development easier for people who don't know about how Web3 works. Like, so when I think we'll go more into this as we go into the podcast, but Web3 requires you to have certain other skills other than your core Web2 skills, and third web just removes all of that, and you just write Web 2 code to make Web 3 applications. That's the idea of third web.
Okay. Very cool.
Mhm.
I'm sure that's been helpful as you are, focused on Web3 in general, just has been helpful to be immersed in that world and connecting with other Web3 developers and things like that. It seems like the excitement around Web3 is growing pretty quickly. So yeah, would love to dive into it, and just would be great to hear, from your point of view, what is Web3, and, what does it mean? How is it different from Web2? I'm sure most people listening know that Web3 is all about decentralization and moving towards a decentralized web, but deeper than that, like, what does that actually mean and what does that look like? I'd love to hear that from your perspective.
Yeah, so I mean, there are like millions of articles on what Web3 is, what it tries to do, but the way I like to explain it is, typically, when you're like in the Web2 world, let's say you're on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or whatever, like the creators, they're putting all their heart and soul into making content, like, and they're basically working for the platform. If you think about it, like, it's the platform that benefits off of these creators, like it's the platform that makes all the money, right? In the Web3 world, it's about the like one of the things about Web3 is its transfer of wealth. So where the creators and the users of the platform, they are the main benefiters of the entire system. And another thing that, and this is done through ownership, that's been given through NFTs and tokens and all sorts of different things. So, but it's mostly about decentralization. That means everyone has the power to participate in, like, and participate in a network and be a part of a platform, let's say, and they can get tangible benefits out of it. So things like, lots of artists are making their art in the Web2 world. There's not much that they could do with them. They post it on Twitter, it would get, it would go viral, maybe it would get like 100,000 likes, but that's about it. That's all the creator gets. The creator just gets likes. But in the Web3 world, they could have sold their art as an NFT, and they could have benefited from it directly. So that's sort of like the premise of Web3. It's giving power to the creators and the users of the platform rather than these big corporations. And that's sort of what Web3 tries to do. And yeah, I think that's how I would explain it.
Okay. Yeah, I like the way that you give an example. I think it helps people understand instead of just, using the same kind of canned explanation. I think it's really helpful to paint a picture of, what does that really mean? How is it going to be different for blogging and for social media and content creating and things like that? So that's a helpful way to understand. And then, so how is Web3 going to be different for developers then? Like, how does Web2 development look different from Web3 development when it comes to coding and frameworks and tools people are using? What are going to be the main drivers to get there, and how will the lives of developers be different in a Web3 world?
So I think this is sort of a bit misunderstood. Like from what most people I see is that they feel like Web3 is like something totally different than what Web2 is like. But in reality, most of Web3 development, I mean, the way I see it is that Web3 development just adds on top of Web2, traditional Web2 development, right? So the thing is that you can't have all the data on the blockchain because when you keep data on the blockchain, to put data on the blockchain, it's expensive, right? You only put very specific things on the blockchain. That so because of that reason, most of the things still remain the same. You still have the same, React or Vue.js or whatever front end. You have like this is like a similar backend. You have a database, you have your backend application, you have APIs, everything's pretty much the same. But what adds on top, in Web3, what is added on top is something called, smart contracts. So smart contracts allow you to interact with the blockchain, and you can make transactions on the blockchain. You can send data to the blockchain, and you can verify data using like using smart contracts that you write. So that's like sort of like the only change that you have to do. And for that you'll have to learn a couple of tools here and there. So I mean, it's not it's you're just adding stuff on that you've already learned in Web 2. You're just adding stuff on top of it. And for that, you'll have to, learn a couple of JS frameworks maybe, and you have to learn a new programming language called Solidity. So there are two main chains. I'm just trying to simplify it here, but there are two main blockchains that you have. You have the Ethereum ecosystem, and then you have the Solana ecosystem. So these are like two popular blockchains. And for Solana, you'll need Rust. For Ethereum, you'll need a language called Solidity, where you'll write the smart contracts. So the smart contracts basically define what transaction happens on the blockchain, and the rules of whatever is going to happen on the chain. And other than that, you'll have to use some accompanying JavaScript or Python frameworks to interact with the data on the blockchain. So these are like the two things that are added on top. You're still using the same database on the backend for other things like storing other data and whatnot. You are still using APIs, the same front end as I explained. So that's like the only part that's being added: Solidity, Rust, and some frameworks here and there.
Okay, interesting. So it's probably, reassuring for developers that are just starting to look into this, and how it's going to change their world, to hear that this doesn't mean that they completely have to relearn or change their tactics or, abandon the frameworks and languages they're currently working with. It's more just, I think you said, layering on top of the skill set they already have, which is kind of what people in the tech world in a lot of industries are already doing anyway. When you move around jobs, or every year you move forward in a career, like, you're still learning and adding on anyway. So it's maybe it's just going to be that the things that we're learning and moving towards are going to be these Web3 languages that you mentioned. So that's probably reassuring.
Yeah, exactly. I think you put it perfectly. You're just adding things on top of what you already know. That's basically it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on, like, how close are we really as in the world, but also like individuals and different companies? Like, how close are people to moving towards Web3? Do you think there's some companies that are really going full steam ahead and are trying to do everything they can? Are there some that are really resistant? Is it something that has to be done kind of all at once? Like, what does that look like to get there? I know there's so many different opinions about it. I've been reading about, and I recently wrote a blog to kind of dissect, like, what does Web3 mean for data storage? Just, obviously I'm in the database world and was curious what it means for database technology and things. And I realized after a lot of research that I personally think it's going to be more incremental steps, where it's not just one or the other. It's not like you're just in Web 2 or just in Web 3, but you can take small steps towards that end goal. You don't have to do all the big changes at once. So yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, like how quickly people are moving towards it, and maybe tips if there are individuals or companies trying to help get there.
Yeah, so it's definitely going to be, an incremental path towards, Web3, and I think you can see that by what Twitter is doing. So, Twitter recently added integration for NFTs, so you can basically um, like display your NFT as like your profile picture, and it will have once you click on the profile photo, it will show you details of the NFT. You can look it on OpenSea, which is like this sort of gallery for NFTs. So you can go there and you can see all the details about the NFT and things like that. So and then if you look at gaming companies like Ubisoft, or I think even EA is trying to get into NFTs. What they're doing is they're using NFTs to basically show ownership of in-game items. Like let's say you get a skin in a game, that like the skin can be an NFT. So even if, let's say, 10 years down the line, the game, it's not really all that active, it's kind of a dead game, you still have that skin that's as an sort of like an art piece, or like, sort of like a memory that, hey, you had this skin 10 years ago in this game. So they're like, companies are, they're trying to explore options wherein they can, integrate NFTs, tokens, and things like that into their existing games or application, whatnot it may be. So it's definitely going to be an incremental path. And yeah, and like another really good example that came to my mind is, you can actually use Twitter. You can like set up like this button where you have your public address for your wallet, and
Mhm.
using that, people can send you like, donations in cryptocurrency. So, and we're slowly seeing all these big corporations just add small features here and there. And I think that will lead to lead to like, like a full Web3 world, when you where all applications have all these Web3 features that are ubiquitous. So you'll see NFTs everywhere. You'll see tokens being used. You'll be able to donate. You'll be able to make transactions in cryptocurrency. So yeah, I think it's going to be an incremental path till we get there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's those examples are interesting. I did see that Twitter recently had been making those changes, but I haven't really had the time to dig deeper and see what that really means, or see examples of people doing that. So it's cool to have, it's cool for people to have the option. It's not like the shift just happens and it's a requirement. It's like you have the option to exercise this additional feature. And so yeah, I love the way that you explain that. I think that's helpful. I'm curious, what is your opinion on these changes, on NFTs and on blockchain? Like, obviously with any type of change in technology, there's pros and cons, and there's a lot of things that are super super exciting about this, but I've seen so many debates. I know Dev2 did like a big, I think Ben or someone posted like, convince me that Web3 is terrible or something, and I was reading some of the comments, the threads on that people got pretty deep into. And so I'm curious, like, what are your general opinions? Obviously, you're excited about it. You're working in this world, and helping promote it, helping share awareness about it. But do you have any like anything you're nervous about, or any roadblocks, or just any anything on the other side of the argument?
Yeah, so I feel like there are, a lot of fair arguments against, what has been going on in the Web3 world, NFTs and things like that. And I think a lot of those are fair. So like, I think there are multiple debates we had, but so some of the ones that I was like kind of concerned about is like sort of like the environmental effects of NFTs. So what an NFT, what it basically is that an NFT shows ownership of like, it shows that you own a particular file, and by own it means that you just I mean, you don't have any copyrights to it, but it's sort of like, you get bragging rights for it, right? But that's how most people see it. But like, the thing is, to make an NFT, you have to pay something called gas fees, and this is basically computation that happens on the blockchain when you're creating the NFT. So that requires a lot of energy. So that's like the environmental effect of NFTs that a lot of people discuss about. But recently there have been, so many solutions for that have been fixing this. So there are like alternative chains to Ethereum, like Polygon or Phantom or Avalanche, which have far lesser of an environmental effect. Like, they use far lesser energy, they're cheaper to mint, and things like that. So we're seeing improvements here and there. So like, the environmental effects are slowly getting fixed. And other than that, there's also the problem where NFTs are basically used for money laundering. And that is also getting fixed through regulation of cryptocurrencies, and just um, you know like how and we're trying to like figure out a way so that we can prevent money laundering and things like that. So like, things like like, you can verify NFTs on OpenSea and things like that. So we're slowly just trying to figure out a way on how to fix the money laundering issue. And other than that, some people say that NFTs are just JPEGs, they're just files. There's no value to an NFT, right? But slowly we have been seeing a lot of different projects that sort of give utility to NFTs, and that's something I'm personally really excited about. So like I mentioned, how before you could own in-game items using NFTs that that show that you own like this in-game item, and That's so there's utility to an NFT. It's not just a JPEG or whatever. So like, we're seeing all these use cases come up, and you know that's what really excites me. But yeah, we're also, at the same time, it's a long way to go. We're still, working on figuring out some of the issues and some of the problems that we're having right now. But there are all sorts of debates there. But um, I would say, like, we made a tremendous amount of progress in the last year. So that's what, really makes me, optimistic on this technology. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
that
I
makes
think,
sense. And I think it's actually interesting the way you're talking about it. It's at least, I think it's actually probably helpful in cases like this for people to come out and express their concerns and express the other side of the argument and why they might be not even against moving towards Web3, but just, a little bit hesitant about some of these things, because it's probably
Mhm.
helpful for the people trying to get us there to be able to address those concerns and say, okay, you're right. Like there's something we could improve upon, instead of just ignoring it and saying like, no, this is the way. Being able to take that feedback and say, well, here's how we can ease people's concerns, and here's the changes we can make, and how we can make this easier. And so it seems like that's kind of already happening, which is really exciting and good to hear.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's really good, that the community, we like the entire community is like really amazing. And they recognize the issues that are in, with NFTs and whatnot. And we're actively, like, everyone's actively trying to, figure out solutions to these. And we're making so much progress, it's really good to see.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. So I know you've mentioned already a couple specific kind of tools and technologies, but are there, I'd love to hear a little bit about like what type of Web3 tech, what would you say are some of your favorite like softwares or tools or technologies that you're using now or that are coming out, or just, what types of like, if people are trying to learn more, what systems should they be learning, things like that?
Yeah, so from my experience, obviously I've worked for thirdweb, and thirdweb is a fantastic tool. So it's a no-code tool, and also has, a set of like APIs and SDKs that allows you to do Web3 development using, just Python or JavaScript. So there's that. And then other than that, I mentioned this programming language called Solidity, and that you'll probably have to learn that pretty well. And then other than that, there are two options from there. You can either use the Python suite of, Web3 tools, or you can use the JavaScript set. So in Python, you have things like you have web3.py. So that is used for interacting with the data on the blockchain and interacting with your, smart contract that you write in Solidity. Other than that, in JavaScript, you have web3.js that does the same thing as web3.py for Python. And in JavaScript, you also have tools like Hardhat, Truffle, Waffle, things like that. So these allow you to, sort of create like a local blockchain that's on your system, so that, you can test your smart contracts, play with them a little bit. And, it also gives you like a test wallet that you can use to, work with these smart contracts and whatnot. And then, these like this can basically, fit in with your typical backend that you might have. Maybe let's you have like a Flask or a Django or a fast API backend on Python or whatever, or maybe you have something on PHP. You can basically connect these pieces together, and that's how, we can, get started with creating Web3 apps. And that's generally how the development works. And the front end remains unchanged. You still be taking JSON data and, working with that on the front end in React or Vue or whatever JavaScript framework that you're working with. So yeah, that's sort of like a basic, it's only that the backend has some, changes to it.
Okay, interesting. Yeah,
Mhm.
I was trying to take notes as you were talking. I'll have to go back and listen to, because I want to make a list of the different tools and technologies you've mentioned. And I've seen people talking about these a lot more. I think it's as you said, there's so much information out there right now on this, and it's probably helpful to have like a centralized community or centralized platform, or who knows, maybe there will be, or there already is, like a blogging platform specifically dedicated to this, so that all these articles can be in one place, because there's so much information to gather about it. And so it's always helpful to connect with knowledgeable folks. I know you mentioned that you are going to be soon focusing more on a side project that you're working on. Are you able to share more about that or what it is that you're working on or building at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is something I'm really excited about. So, I'm working with the folks over at Polygon. I'm working closely with them to make this project happen. So, Polygon is to put it like in simple terms, it's a blockchain that is based on Ethereum, and it's faster, it's cheaper, and it gives you all the benefits of the Ethereum ecosystem. But as I mentioned, the problem for most Web2 developers and like developers is that you'll have to learn Solidity, you'll have to learn these whole sorts of other frameworks, and you'll have to get used to this entire Web3 thing, and it can be a bit difficult and intimidating. What I'm trying to do with the side project is that make it easier for them to basically write smart contracts and without having to do all the testing and stuff like that. So let's say they have their own Web2 application, they can just use um, like a set of tools, and they can make smart contracts, make NFTs, make tokens, and things like that. So that's what I'm trying to do here. So I'm basically trying to abstract away the Web3 stuff, and so that they can just focus on building their application that they want to, or whatever they want to achieve. So that's sort of like the basic idea of it.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. I have heard of that company, and that should be cool to see what you're working on. It sounds like you have definitely have your hands full. And will probably stay that way for quite a while. I know I love having these conversations with so many different people on the podcast and learning about, well, this is what I do full time, but here's like the 10 other things I'm also doing on the side. They're like, it's
Yeah,
no
yeah,
big
yeah.
deal. I'm trying to tell them, no, that is a big deal. That's really impressive. So it's always fun to learn more about that. Very cool. Well, I know we're coming up here, kind of getting close on time, and this has been extremely helpful for me, and I'm sure for anyone that's listening, to just get like an overview and hear a little bit more about Web3, especially from the developer perspective. But I'm curious: is there anything else you want to share, either about Web3 or just outside of that world, like in the development tech world in general? Like anything else you're excited about right now, or focusing on, or learning that you haven't already mentioned?
Yeah, so I guess I feel like there's a lot of hype around Web3, and people are just straight up jumping into it. Like I feel like if you like Web3 is here to stay for a while, so take your time, understand things properly. Make sure you do your own research, make sure you understand everything before you get into it, rather than just jumping into it because this other person on Twitter is like Web3 is the next big thing. Take your time, understand things, and just be aware. Do your research, because it's still a very new space, and there are lots of people that are just trying to take advantage of you. There's lots of scams going on and stuff. We're trying to work towards reducing that, but still just be aware. And because getting into Web3 means that you'll be dealing with money and stuff like that, in cryptocurrency or whatnot. So just do your research, be careful about that. And other than that, you don't have to get into Web3. If you could look into it. If it doesn't really excite you, that's okay. There are lots of other things that are going around that are like really cool right now. There's machine learning, there's game development, there's so much going on. If Web3 doesn't excite you, that's fine. But yeah, like I'm personally more like I'm really excited about machine learning and AI as well. So I've been doing that for a little bit, and I'm doing that alongside my Web3 stuff. So yeah, I mean, I'd encourage you to give it a shot, do your research, because it's really exciting. But if it doesn't work out for you, that's totally okay. And
Yeah,
yeah, that's
I think that's a good point, is don't just jump on the bandwagon just because everyone is talking about it. And it was kind of funny.
exactly.
Yeah, like I was away from kind of social media and stuff for a bit, and it seemed like I came back and all of a sudden I was just seeing, Web3 everywhere. And so I decided to do a blog on it because for me personally, when I write blogs, it's like the best way to learn about something too, because that's when I really do my research and try to read both sides of the argument. But I definitely made the joke when I went to share my blog is like, I went and jumped on the bandwagon and wrote, here's another blog about Web3, because it kind of does seem like that's, not what people are doing. I'm sure everyone really is excited about it, but I just think that's a great point, is like, take your time, do your research, figure out if that's really something you want to get into and move towards, or do you want to stay on whatever path you're on, or go a different way. And I'm sure in a couple of years from now, the world of Web3 will be colliding and integrating with lots of different areas anyway. So I think that's a really great point to leave off with.
Yeah. Like, I think people need to realize that if someone's, really impatient about, they're like really crazy about Web3, they're like, Web3 is the next big thing, just jump on. They probably want to, sell you something, sell your course or something, I don't know. But if Web3 is really open and it's for everyone, then, then, you should be able to join at whatever time. We're still very early on. There's still a lot of stuff that we're trying to figure out. So Web3 is not going anywhere. Just take your time. You don't have to rush it. Just understand things, and you be at your own pace. And this, again, as I said before, if this is something that doesn't excite you, there are like a million other things that you could do. So
right. Don't feel peer pressured.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's the best way to put it.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much, Pratham. This has been a really interesting conversation and really helpful for me. And hopefully, I'm sure our listeners as well. I will be sure to put, I'm sure your Twitter is the best place for people to keep up with what you're doing. I'll put the link to your Twitter in the show notes, and let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to include, any other way for people to kind of follow along with what you're working on. And really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I hope we did a good job of explaining what Web3 is, what's going on, and I had a blast on in this entire conversation. Like, thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, of course. Well, looking forward to keeping in touch. I'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Select Star, your resource for innovative technology and developer topics. You can find our episodes in all the usual places: Spotify, Apple, Google, RSS, and YouTube. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and share. You can learn more about HarperDB at harperdb.io.